Hello Tamers, Cyber back ending, and on to day 3 on to our decklist countdown towards BT24 Time Strangers release. And continuing on with the Liberator love, we actually go to the true Liberator topic of BT23, that being the upgraded Ghost deck following the new support it got, as we end up getting the new iteration of the Ghostmon line with some new tools to help the deck's, well, pretty aggro game style of reviving from the dead. And well, before we get into it, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to help well in the algorithm. Without further ado, let's kick this off. And starting off with the egg deck, we're still looking at 5 cards for it. That being a 4-1 split between BT20 Digimon and instead of BT3 Digimon, I decided to pivot to copy BT16 Cupid instead, with BT20 Digimon still being the archetypal egg for its recursion effect, and then the pivot to Cupid being as a means to set up trash and trying to steal turn or maintain turn given the antics that the deck does. Though alternatively you still can reason to instead throw in BT3 Digimon for its draw 1 and trash 1 instead. And that's it for the eggs. Next is the rookie lineup, in which case we're still looking at the core of full placement of BT20 and BT21 Ghost as the main cores, BT20 being your searcher for the deck, and BT21 being the archetypal evolution reducer. And for that, we rounded out with 2 additions of the newer BT23 Ghost, who's on play on on play and on delete, allowing you to grant one of your ghosts with blocker until the end of the opponent's turn, thus giving you one avenue to at least protect yourself and survive the opponent's turn before going for a clapback. With all 3 granting the on delete gain 1 memory for their inherit. And that's it for level 3s. Now on to level 4, in which case we're looking at a 4-2-2 split between BT20 Bake, Promo Bake, and BT23 Bake, with BT20 being the main one as your main tamer cheat, Promo Bake for the on-play on Digivolve, pitch 1 card from hand to delete level 4 lore, and BT23 for its on-play on Digivolve, delete one of your Digimon to also pop a level 4 lower Digimon, with BT20 and 23 granting the gain 1 inherit on delete, and Bake granting your stacks retail. Though alternatively, level 4 you could tech in would be BT20 Summon for its ability to grant retail to anything on the board, as well as the on-delete to pitch a card to delete a level 4 lower. Though the focus on Bake is more so focused around toolboxing for the new Warping Phantomon. And that's it for level 4s. Now on to level 5s, in which case, for archetypal level 5s, we're looking at a 3-3 split between BT20 Phantom and BT23 Phantom, with this ratio being more a bit to my playstyle, considering that I want to have execute early as possible with Phanto, or to trigger off effects early if I need to. While BT23 Phanto still has its obvious uses, being that you could warp your Ghostmons into it as long as Violet on board and a Bakemon in trash to slot under it, thus allowing you some more options considering that you could toolbox from your trash to create a preferred stack if you need be, with both allowing on delete to float into level 4 lower ghost from from trash, with that also being their inherit. As for out of archetype, the obvious answer for this deck has always been BT8 Chimeramon. In this case, I run 3 copies now. Given that you float into a whole lot of Digimon whenever single stack gets popped, or deleted, so you can make use of the new bodies you get by DNAing them into Chimeramon. And thus, you then trigger off, and then you actually have a viable body to swing with, since the DNA allows it. As well, you're able to tuck in a level 5 or lower source from trash, thus allowing you to build an optimal stack if you build Chimeramon off of that, using Chimeramon as the base for the next evolution, as well as the useful DP reductions that grants, hitting opponent's Digimon 4 times, up to 4 Digimon with that DP reduction. Though, as you can see, we kind of kneecapped it since last time, since I didn't include the tech option of Metal Phantomon, since we're only working with just purple now. Though again, you could also choose to slot in Metal Phantomon as an option, considering that's a blocker body inherently, and it's on play on Digivolve to delete one of your own Digimon to pop a level 5 or lower, with the on delete inherit to Digivolve 1 on one target. And that's it for level 5s. Now on to level 6s, in which case we're still looking at a 4-1 split between BT20 Necro and EX5 Anubismon, with Necromon still being the main, your main heavy hitter, with the being a Sec +1 body, and Execute as well, with the on play on Digivolve to pop the lowest level on the opponent's side, and the on play and on delete to bring out a level 5 from trash. And then Anubismon's inclusion here, Page working a bit hand in hand with what the deck wants to do, considering that's when Digivolve and main effect allows you to trash cards in order to reduce the play cost of a card in trash, of a Digimon in trash, to then revive it out. And then you get the Your Turns effect whenever it sees one of your Digimon being played out by effect. You are able to delete a opponent's level 5 or lower, but if it doesn't, you're able to get the draw 1. With this working hand in hand in the fact that you do have effects that can combo off of that revival. And specifically for Necromon here, it gets the boon considering what the new level 7 does. Now, before getting into that, on to tech options for level 6. Since you have a few things to work with, considering that you could choose to add in the Ace Killer himself, Reapermon, or have a tech option in the form of Dr. Ace for an Ace option, or you can go a little defensively with the newer BT23 Necro, who's also an Execute body, with the on play on delete to play out level 5 or lower Ghosts from trash as well, and the Altern's ability to delete himself, to then delete a level 6 Allure, or if it doesn't hit anything, be able to end the attack outright. And a check option that I've seen play out when paired with Phantomon being the promo Boltmon, given that you could DNA off of the level 5s that you float into, and get the full benefits with another blocker body on board as well. And that's it for level 6. Now on to level 7s to round off the Digimon lineup. In this case, we're looking at 2 copies of BT23 Dullahamon as the deck's top end, and pretty heavy hair aggressor, considering that Dullaha is effectively Necromon, but more, pretty much, considering that he now has piercing on him, thus allowing all of your execute swings to pierce through if you choose to run over a unsuspended Digimon with execute, with the one Digivolving effect to hit to pop the highest level. But if it didn't delete anything, you're also able to grant yourself extra DP for the turn, with Dullahamon's on delete allowing you to float into a level 6 Ghost from Trash. In which case, we finally get to then trigger off the effects of Necromon as an on-play, both on-plays, as you effectively then technically float into an additional body from there, adding another to the chain. Though, alternatively, as most usually see, you could choose to tech in Ruin mode for board denial, as well as putting your opponent at the back foot by granting him blanket 5,000 to 10,000 DP reduction. Or you could choose to run Blast Mode Ace, given how much this deck likes to mill itself down for its own effects to set up trash, as well as being able to burn away security for a few instances of attacks. And that's it for the Digimon lineup. And next on to Tamers, in which case we're looking at a 3-3 split between BT20 Violet, a 3-4 split and BT23 Violet, with BT20 here being the passive memory gain, and also a evolution reducer whenever she sees you play out a Digimon from trash, reducing the evolution by 2. While BT23 Violet here is sort of the linchpin for the deck now, as even though she can bounce herself back to the bottom of the deck to play out another Violet from hand, you're mainly running her for her Your Turns effect, as whenever she sees one of your Digimon evolve into a ghost trait, she grants them Rush, which, in this case, helps well, considering that it then makes any fresh execute bodies that you Digivolve into gain Rush, and thus making execute live again. And to run off the Tamer lineup is the full playset of Analog Youth, considering that, once again, useful is useful, being able to dig 3 and add a Digimon among them and trashing the rest of the cards. Though it hurts less now, considering other cards and that came with BT23, so even if you mill Violets, you're still able to get a plus considering, as well as the usual use. Whenever he sees any level 5 or higher Digimon on your side be deleted, you get to gain 1 memory and hatch in raising. Though obviously goes without saying that the other tamer you could put in is the memory setter Violet, as well as granting a trash one option or ghost from hand to set trash, to then get draw 1 to recur pieces. Oh, for further digging. And that's it for the Tamers. Now on to options. In which case, we're pretty much looking a bit bare bones for this one, considering how the deck works, as we're doing a 3-2 split between Unique Emblem, Soul Banquet, and Purple Scramble. Since, given the nature of the deck, you're pretty much ripping through your deck, so anything that doesn't see value ends up being a sunk cost, really. So it makes sense that Soul Banquet and Purple Scramble would be your forms of recursions in this deck of anything that isn't really archetypal or of use. Since again, Soul Banquet, like all the other unique emblems, will allow you to cheat out a Ghostmon or Violet from hand or trash, with the your turn's delay, whenever it sees Violet get suspended, allows one of your Ghost Digimon to Digivolve up into a Ghost and Liberator trait, reducing the evolution by 3, and then security effect allowing you to trigger the main effect. While Purple Scramble here is also another form of recursion in this deck, as well as being tempo, allowing you to Digivolve up for its main effect, and then its delay, as usual, being able to recur a piece in place of your normal draw, and if you're sitting on an empty board, allowing you to float into a level 3 that meets the criteria, potentially getting a search off of it, with it also being the same case for the security effect before adding itself to hand. Though, optionally, you could choose to tech in the limited Jack Raid for memory gain based off of how your trash looks, or Calling from Darkness to also trigger off deletion effects, also recurring 2 pieces of your line to claim, and then Wisdom Training optionally for digging, and the ability to Digivolve at reduced costs as delay. As much as I like to put in Purple Moon Boost, once again, you're sort of looking at sync cost depending on the situation, since you do mill a somewhat decent bit in this deck. And that's it for the deck lineup itself. Now on to combos. And then before combos, we then go over the mulligan hand. In which case, I'm definitely looking at seeing, ideally, BT20 and BT21 Ghost in hand, so that you could play BT20 for the search, and then 21 in the back to set up later. Then from there, Analog Youth for more digging, and Soul Banquet to salvage early on to either cheat out a Ghostmon or cheat out Violets, either from hand or from any that go to trash due to Analog Youth. And then from there, further setup plays with the Bakes, with BT20 cheating out Violets from hand, or some form of control early on with 23, and then pretty much seeing the rest of your line to climb. Since for the most part, you're effectively building your endgame towards your endgame through all this milling and sort of digging, pretty much. Since, for the most part, you have a few leeway options, considering that Chimera can then make use of trash cards, and then making your top end all more effective. And that's it for Mulligan Hand. Now on to the actual combos. And then going into combos, for the first one, we're looking at the more straightforward one, in this case. Starting pretty much on an established board with BT20 Violet and the Unique Emblem up, with a BT21 Ghostmon established in. So, being choked at 1, Ghost comes out, And Violet will see that the opponent has a Digimon on board, so you gain 1, starting the turn out at 2 memory. And then we start the climb up. In which case, Ghost into Bake, specifically BT20 Bake in this case, reducing evolution by 1, and then getting BT23 Violet live on board. Then from there, we then have our plays into Phanto for the 3 cost. And then from there, before triggering anything, since this Phanto doesn't really have execute, we can then trigger off Violet, granting a rush, though that main idea for this is the fact that you triggered off this Violet's suspend effect, thus tuning into the Unique Emblem to then allow that Phantomon to digivolve up into, well, in this case, mostly, Dullahamon, reducing the evolution by 3, going to 5, or alternatively, even though we're looking at a situation where Necromon is already sitting in trash, you could instead go into Necromon depending on hand state and the board state, since once they come on board, they have the relatively same idea on how the combo works. Since on board, on Digivolve, we'll proceed to pop something, and then proceed to trigger off their execute. Though primarily in this case, Dullahamon is your main heavy-duty body. Since Dullahamon will delete something, then gain a DP buff if it doesn't delete anything, and will proceed to swing, either running over into a body or charging headlong into security, putting a dent with the 2 checks, and then self-delete as the aftermath of execute. In which case, you then trigger off your inherent effects accordingly, ideally in order, triggering off the Memgain inherits. Then from there, triggering off other effects that you'd want. In this case, you could then trigger off Phantomon to revive either Ghost or Bake off of the effect if you want, thus making use of Phanto. Then Dullahamon to then float into Necromon sitting in trash. Since from there, you then use Demimera to then recur back Dullahamon to hand. Since from this board state, Necromon's on plays will go off, popping lowest level once again, and reviving a body. Once again, going pretty wide once more, with either your Phantos, Bakes, or Ghosts that are sitting in trash based on board state. Since from there, then the Violet will then see, BT20 Violet will then see the deletion, and thus allowing you to climb up accordingly to what you have in hand and what you need. Since again, Necro can potentially go into Dullaha once again, or you can climb off of either the level 3 or 4 body spawned off of Phanto, or the 5 or 3 body spawned off of Necro. Alternatively, we can then look at a situation where we're looking at a empty board with BT23 Violet on board, Purple Scramble, and Unique Emblem with a already decimated board state of your initial stack already being lost. In this case, as seen with usual with how purple would normally the scrambles would combo in. Pop purple scramble and recur out specifically BT23 Phanto to the top of deck. And since we're looking at an empty board, recurring out BT21 Ghost. Thus, proceed to draw, drawing into the Phanto. Then from there, going off the Ghost into Phanto since Violet's live, and making use of any of your Bakes sitting in trash, though specifically any of your Memgain ones to ensure turn. And then from there, Violet will then trigger off, excuse me, and then apply his rush to the stack, thus allowing the stack to have any executes applied to it later on, live now. And thus, Unique Emblem goes off once again. And then you could proceed once again into either Dullahamon or Necro once again in this situation. As we then lead into the combo once again of swing in, executing for 2 checks on either body, and thus once again blowing up and going wide once more. Though another situation we could look at is one where the deck is able to OTK, and on a more established board in that matter, as we're looking at the 4-card set of BG20 and 23 Violet's live, Analog Youth live, and Soul Banquet live, while also having built up a level 5 in raising for this. Since from there, the Phanto would, well, specifically Phanto in this case, since Phanto will move out, Violet sees BT20, Violet sees the opponent with Digimon board, gain 1 memory, and then from there, with Necro in hand, Digivolving up into Necro for the cost 4. And then from there, swinging in security off of the execute and trying to survive the first check, since you still want the second check from the security +1, since at the end of that, we'll then proceed to blow up and trigger effects accordingly, gaining back 1 memory each from the Ghost Inherits. And then we proceed to trigger off effects. As from there, revive anything off of the effect. In this case, Phanto's Inherent can bring out any of your ghosts from hand, from trash in this combo. And then Necro then revive out Bake. And then you recur out with the Demimera into your Necro. Since from there, on this empty board state, Violet sees a Digimon being blown up, and thus allowing you to Digivolve from hand the Bake into another Bake while keeping turn. Also Analog Youth, single deletion, and gaining back 1 memory. So from there, going into DNAing into Chimera once again. And then, once again, resetting up by taking in more from the stack, depending on board state, from hand or trash. Ideally, a mem gain inherit, as you once again drop Necromon onto the board. Once again, popping lowest level and proceeding to then trigger off, execute once again, taking out 2 memory once more, popping itself for any memory. Oh, and before I forget, you also ideally can choose to put in Phantomon off of that Chimera play, since in this situation, we're then looking at a 3 memory gain, 3 memory refund, and then more recursion off of the effects. As once again, Phanta will then revive another Digimon board. And then Necro reviving your Phanto onto the board. And from there, being able to play out accordingly, since you have a few avenues to then get the final checks. Since again, Violet can use to grant any of your execute bodies that you bring out Digivolve over the new bodies on board with their execute, now live with that rush, and thus allowing you to play into other bodies depending on board state, since Violet and Unique Emblems pretty much allows you to have a few freedoms in how to trigger off execute accordingly. Though once again, the inclusion of Anubis into this deck, you have a few more avenues in the form of just going pretty wide and establishing cards in trash, if need be, to then revive out from trash anything at reduced cost, further making wider boards, and then some. But overall, pretty much this has been my look at the Ghost deck in the BT23 format, as the deck in and of itself has a lot more avenues to be super aggressive with a pretty much undead army, since you're constantly flowing into bodies, and with the new BT23 Violet enabling you to attack with those new bodies if you Digivolve off of them, which isn't that hard, considering that, once again, the Unique Emblem pairs super well with the BT23 Violet in her easier condition to suspend, allowing more ramping plays to make things a lot more possible. And yeah, once again, this deck is pretty fun to play, as you're pretty much swinging into the opponent quite heavily with bodies that come back from the grave, really. But overall, that has been my look at the deck during the BT23 format. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to keep up with what I'll be doing as we continue on with the BT24 Time Stranger Countdown later into this week. And this is Cyberdra signing off.